I invite you, Governor, I invite the people on the budget to do me a favor. Come with me. Come to a house. Come to a group home. See who the children are. Talk to the people that work there. You're going to get an earful of dedicated people, our direct care service professionals. I want to ask you, how many people here are going to tell your children, hey, listen, when you grow up, I want you to be a direct caregiver? Are you kidding me? The lowest job, the hardest, the most difficult. You're dealing with human dignity and respect. You have to be a special person. And I just don't understand if we don't pay people like this. Where are our values? Are they upside down? Are we talking about dollars here and minimum wage here and the difficulty of training and the obligation and responsibility?
As far as taking care of him, I'm it. My husband is gone. My brother died in this past January, and he used to help me. And I have sisters, but they have grandchildren and lives of their own, so they can't really watch him, so I am it. My daughter does try to help me as much as possible, but she's 30 and she needs to have a life. I can't put that on her. And Nicholas is violent. He's incredibly hard to handle. He hits me on a daily basis. He pushes me. Not that he means to, it's just the way he is. He's just a nervous Nelly, and he's really difficult. He's a very difficult kid to handle. He needs 24-hour supervision. He can never, ever be left alone. He has no concept of danger. He can't read, he can't write, he can't dial 911. He functions on the level of a 2 or 3-year-old.
We've come a long way, and we can start to slip back into where you're more warehousing individuals than giving them a life, a good life in the community. It takes funding to put people in the community. You know, you just don't bring people out into the community by truckloads. They have to be small little groups and with adequate staff so that they can be integrated into the community. And that funding cuts jeopardize that possibility in the future.
We were blessed with a special child. And you know, he was almost 4 years old. Beautiful baby. He was so good. He doesn't speak, he didn't cry, and he smiled. And all of a sudden, my wife, who was a nurse and a very loving person, said there's something wrong. And the pediatrician said, well, he'll outgrow it, it'll come in time, maybe he's a late developer. But Ellen knew. So we went to the doctor. He had a clubfoot, developmentally disabled, profoundly retarded, couldn't speak, and couldn't cry. What's best for us to do?
I'm the mother of a 43-year-old man who, interestingly, was diagnosed with autism at his first birthday by my sister, who's a physician. She's deceased now, but it was unheard of to identify children with autism 42 years ago at his first birthday party. And I remember her asking me if I knew what autism was. And at the time I was a PhD candidate, so I was no dummy. I had never heard of it.
I have not been able to place him because he needs not a nursing home. He needs a facility that has trained personnel, nurses, more than just a residential manager. And nothing has come up. Once something has come up. Since my husband has died, I got fired when my husband died from my job for taking too much time off to try to, get things settled in my home after, since I had nobody to care for Nick. Cannot work since because I have nobody to take care of him. He's not gone long enough hours for me to work.
Well, many people don't even know what Willowbrook, especially today, don't know what Willowbrook was, but Geraldo Rivera at the time was a young reporter, and he went into the institution called Willowbrook that housed thousands of children and adults with developmental disabilities on Staten Island, and he was sort of he was allowed in, on the QT, and he filmed what was absolutely horrible. I just was recently in a program where a man who worked at Willowbrook described what it was like to work there, that the individuals that they were caring for were 30, 40 people, half naked, in one large room that they locked the door with 3 staff people. He described how they were bathed, Dave. It was absolutely stunning. He said they would line the people up, and one person would wet them down, another person would soap them, another person would rinse them. And then they would rummage and try to get some little rag to put on them that was not even clothing, really. It was absolutely horrible. And after that expose, Willowbrook was closed. People were deinstitutionalized. Later on, then Governor Carey signed a Willowbrook consent decree, which described how institutions would be emptied. We're still on that process. If my memory serves me correctly, there are, I believe, 4 institutions still open with much diminished populations, and those are all going to be closed. I believe the target date is 2015. So subsequent governors, including Governor Cuomo, this current Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, have made it a policy or pledge that they will close all of the institutions.
Willowbrook was just horrendous, and it was an atrocity that anybody would be treated like that. And yes, things are much better now. However, I will say that since I am a nurse, I am in contact with people who do work in residential facilities. And I will say these kids need people who are educated to take care of them, to understand what they're going through, and they need to make more money. They are so difficult to handle.
And when you have a special child, in those days in the 50s, your family doctor said the best thing you can do is have your child go to a facility that will be able to care for them, they'll feed them and clothe them, and they will provide for them. And what you have to do in order to maintain stability in your family is to let these people take charge or control of the life of your child. Now, any loving parent, how difficult it is to give somebody else a responsibility that is yours, that you cherish and love and appreciate your child, and you want to provide for that child. To give that ability of taking care of your own child to somebody else is a very painful, devastating experience. When you went there, they said, we'll take care of your child, but you stay away here from us for 6 weeks because we have to have this child to be able to adapt to his new environment.
When he was 21 and aged out of the education department and went into the state care, I was told by Medicaid that anything I got from now on was a gift.
Some of the changes, I don't want to seem like a naysayer. Some of the ideas, like something called self-direction and self-determination, where the individual with a disability and his family run the show. They get a budget and they hire people, and they have to partner with an agency, but they hire people and they supervise the people and they determine the program. Well, that is a very good thing, excellent thing for those for whom it's appropriate. But you were just talking about the woman you went to high school who can't work because her son is so difficult. That's a situation like that. You're not going to find a parent being able to find staff and supervise staff and develop a program. A circle of friends, they call it. Well, I'm sorry. You're just not going to find the circle of friends who are going to deal with a 6'3", violent, large man. Doesn't happen. Not going to happen. The group homes are wonderful, but And now the idea, OPWDD, which is the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, the state agency, and on the federal level, they're pushing for families to keep their adult disabled child at home and to care for them in their own home with supports and services. And as I said, for those families for whom that's appropriate, it's great. It didn't exist before. You know, new things and new opportunities are always a positive thing. But let's not get rid of the things that were working for families who either due to socioeconomics are unable to stay home and supervise and have their own little unique individualized program.
I also now, Medicaid, every 6 months, I have to get recertified for services, and I have to prove to them every 6 months that he's still retarded. So I have to go to all my doctors, and they all have to write notes, and that he's still retarded, that it didn't go away. Miraculously, it didn't go away.
Even in the conference committees, I asked a simple question. Governor, people on the budget committee, have you ever fed a person who couldn't feed themselves? Have you changed a diaper? Do you know how to do a feeding tube to a child who can't feed himself? Are you aware of how difficult life is when you're challenged? How difficult is it for your families?
What happened to our child, Ricky? 6 weeks he was there, and when we went there, or when Ellen went there, basically, and she saw her child, who weighed 50 pounds when he was there to start, was down to under 25 pounds. He lost half his body weight, looked like a concentration victim, was bent over, his tongue was black. What we heard and what we found out was the residents were feeding him because he could not feed himself and wasn't being fed. And he just looked horrible. So, of course, Ellen took this child back and brought him to our pediatrician. The pediatrician cried. That's how devastating Ricky was. He looked like a victim from a concentration camp. And Ellen, who is probably the most loving person that you could ever meet in this world, brought Ricky back to good health. And then what happened is we're going to have to do what we can to find a resource or a facility that would take better care of our children, especially of our own child, Ricky.
Well, when my son had his breakdown in '97 when he was 15, there was, we suspected, because he changed so dramatically, we did suspect that he was abused. Subsequently, of course, there was no way to prove it because I was told by lawyers that it would be his word against somebody who was allegedly normal, and, you know, he's not going to be able to really testify on his behalf. And the person that we believe abused him had a very long history of problems within the mentally retarded community and had been kind of roaming from site to site to site as he got, I guess, caught. Nobody did anything because it's very hard to prove anything legally. However, if you ask me, I would say that he was definitely responsible, and something did happen to my son because he changed dramatically from a very lovely, wonderful, loving child to a psychotic person. And I mean, you know, listen, I had limited resources. What could I tell you? There's nothing really you could do because nobody's going to listen to a child like Nicholas.
And you just don't understand that every person that I know, almost everyone, almost 100% of these people work 2 jobs because their pay is so low that they have to work 2 jobs in order to be able to pay their bills. But there are some of these people that are so dedicated. They're wonderful people who become surrogate parents for the residents that they take care of the children. They become, as I said, like surrogate parents. They love and do the best they can. And yet, we have people that aren't qualified, that don't have that instinct for love and caring, and they have a job. And if they're hired for a job that has control like this, that is stressful and difficult, then we end up with incidents that are very sort of dangerous because of Jonathan's case and many others of abuse and neglect. So I had hearings on this. And in hearings, I had people, one hearing I had was for 8 hours. And we had over 40 different families talking to me about the incidents that have occurred with them or their family members from all over the state of New York. And then we did a little research and we found out in 1 year that we had 13,000 incidents of neglect and abuse. Less than 5% investigated, and not one reported to law enforcement. Now, this is an awakening.
There's no question that the people who live in his group home cannot go out on their own and cannot go out into the community, is what I mean by out, in large groups unless they have sufficient staff. So if there are cutbacks and the number of staff that are on a given shift are reduced, what's going to happen is people like Rico will be under house arrest for the crime of being developmentally disabled, because he literally cannot walk out the door by himself. He couldn't cross that street by himself. He wouldn't look at the traffic properly. If there was a fire, I think he would leave, but he certainly wouldn't know how to call the fire department or and his language is limited. He wouldn't even know what to say. So, yes, I think the answer is no. I don't think they're going to abandon group homes and push people out of them. What I do think is that the system might reduce the funding, and that would have an impact on the quality of life that he now has, which I believe is a very nice quality of life.
These kids they're not even kids, they're adults. They need professional people that are paid, compensated for what they do.
So if there are cutbacks and the number of staff that are on a given shift are reduced, what's going to happen is people like Rico will be under house arrest for the crime of being developmentally disabled, because he literally cannot walk out the door by himself.
The money is there. We put it in the Assembly budget. The Senate put it in their budget. Bipartisan. What happened to that money? It was there. Now it isn't there. And when you talk about negotiations, it's very upsetting. I spoke to every senator, every assemblyman, every Democrat, every Republican. You know it. We're all in favor of it. Well, let our voice now unite together, and the only way we're going to have success is to educate and make the governor aware. Make him sensitive to understand. Make everybody who's involved sensitive to understand the quality of life, the dignity and the respect, and the relief to families. And we have hundreds of thousands of people that are being impacted by these cuts. Their voices have to be heard. By the way, that's an expression that was given to me many years ago. You're the voice of those who have no voice. Well, that's an obligation and responsibility, but now it's ours. You said it, you feel it, God bless you, and I thank you. We're one family here. Together, we will have success, and I thank you.